on my drumming, which at the time I was playing bass, but I always try to really hone in on his concept because he really had us listening to like Al Jackson Jr. and Gene Crispin, and a bunch of the great drummers, you know, obviously. I can't say enough, and I'm kind of at a loss just to where to begin, you know, and especially in terms of like imparting any of the knowledge that he imparted to me. It's, you know, there's so much I wouldn't know where to start.
Yeah.
But like I said, there's just everything that I do is somehow informed by like what he imparted, and singularly, he's the most important musical influence in my life for sure. You know,
Awesome.
Later in life, he wound up becoming a friend and a mentor, but you know, I felt like I could always call him and ask him for advice, and he was always there. He was always receptive. He always was sort of worried about me, which was interesting, and I didn't understand. I understand it more now that I'm older, and my window of things is sort of closing. That I was worried. I'm not so worried about those things anymore, but he always told me, you know, the better you are, the harder it is, and I never understood why, because that didn't make sense. But you know, I see really bad music being very successful and popular, and it's because people can relate to it. And he always sort of had my number, like he knew that I was just really left of center, and that everything I did came with a quirk that was really inaccessible. I mean, a lot of what I do is very inaccessible for a lot of people, and tends to rub people strangely. So.
Yeah. So you mentioned it a little bit, but can you talk about Sons of Mudboy and how that kind of came about?
Sure. Well, it came from the fact that, you know, they're all their sons.
Yeah.
But sort of by proxy and by adopted sonhood of me spending so much time with those guys and playing with Jim, we wound up backing up Mudboy and the Neutrons as well. I don't remember how many shows we played, but we wound up backing those guys up, and then when Lee passed, and that sort of ended that whole thing. And it's just become a thing, I think, with Jim passing as well, that and now Sid, that it was sort of imparted to them that it's very important for that musical lineage to continue, because they taught, especially those guys. You know, I'm there, and I definitely learned as much as I could, but those guys definitely have it in their blood, and I don't consider myself, you know, to be that fully of a son of Mudboy, but basically it's all of us just trying to keep that music alive, you know, and I think to some degree we're entirely too capable of musicians to do it justice. They always had something ramshackle and crazy, and it was more about the performance art a lot of times going on and stuff that, I mean, I have had electronic, like a solo project that I did back in the past called Interrobang, where I would fully dress up in crazy wigs and outfits and face paint. Or like I did my first show at the Shell, I just decided spontaneously to strip down to my boxers and go out and play the show. And so I've always had that spirit, but I don't know that everybody else is necessarily feeling that, but I think that that's really like, you know, I mean, they had that like in your face, and that was part of the times, it was part of the stuff, the festivals they were throwing at the Shell and the art community, and just the rebellion against society that they stood for at the time. It was in your face, like, we are not going to accept the norm, you know. And I think that that's a very important part of what they stood for, and what Jim still stands for in my mind, is rebelling against the establishment, you know, not doing things for financial gain or to fit in. And for Jim, that was a huge part of his credo of what Memphis was about, being the place, the city where of misfits that didn't fit in anywhere else. Mind you, you still got Elvis. I mean, you got everything from Memphis Jug Band to Elvis to Justin Timberlake to MGMT. You know, you have so much music from here. If they go out, then or heaven forbid, let's not forget Booker Little, Charles Lloyd, like all the jazz stuff. If they go out, they always wind up making a new thing. But in terms of the people that stay here, you know, I think there's some of that music that's actually maybe just spiritually too potent. That's a pompous and weird thing to say, but like, there's some stuff that comes out of here that just winds up staying here. It's almost like, it's not ready for that, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
And Jim often alluded to that, and to the fact that, you know, that can't be helped, and that's sort of how the new music gets created here.
Yeah.
Filters goes.
So you've obviously played with a lot of famous Memphis musicians, like Ann Peebles and people like that.
I did a tour with her. I mean, it wasn't extensive, but I played a small, like, week and a half long tour overseas with her. And it involved like a month and a half of rehearsals. And I was playing bass on that tour. And a genius drummer who was 18 at the time named Victor Williams, who's since wound up having some difficulties, and he kind of got off the scene. But he was a genius drummer. We did that tour. And yeah, that was a huge learning experience for me. Yeah.
So have you ever had a moment like in all this like playing with all these like great people? Have you ever had like just like a moment of being completely humbled as part of like the Memphis music tradition? And like
every time.
Yeah.
Every time. I don't, it gets back to the whole thing of growing up and a lot of people saying like, you're great. And then realizing that I wasn't so great and I had to work for it. And I really try to keep that perspective.